Do you remember a time when you felt truly invisible, when your worth was overlooked, not because you lacked it, but because others refused to see it? Perhaps it was in a crowded room, at a family gathering, or even in the quiet corners of your own home, where your achievements were minimized and your very presence seemed an inconvenience. This is a story about that moment, about the quiet sting of exclusion, and the extraordinary lengths one woman went to ensure her intrinsic value could no longer be dismissed. It is a tale of a hidden gem, Eleanor Brooks, a woman whose true brilliance was about to ignite, not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap that would echo through the lives of those who had so carelessly cast her aside. Eleanor, at 41, carried the quiet dignity of someone who had built her world brick by careful brick, away from the judgmental gaze of a family who had long ago decided where she belonged. Nowhere near their polished image of success. She was an investor from Cape Town, a city of stark contrasts and hidden depths, much like Eleanor herself. Her hands, though accustomed to the cool touch of a keyboard and the crisp rustle of financial documents, bore the faint marks of a past less glamorous, a childhood spent learning the hard lessons of self-reliance. This particular Saturday began with a hopeful anticipation, a rare flutter in her chest for a reunion she genuinely wished could mend the frayed edges of familial connection. She drove her modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle she could well afford, down a familiar winding road that led to the old community hall, a place steeped in the memories of childhood laughter and adolescent awkwardness. The sun, a golden orb in the clear Cape sky, cast long shadows before her, almost mimicking the long shadow of expectation she carried. She pulled into the dusty parking lot, the gravel crunching beneath her tires, a sound that seemed unusually loud in the stillness. A single, faded banner, proclaiming family reunion, hung askew above the entrance, its letters peeling. Eleanor stepped out, her eyes scanning for familiar faces, for the telltale signs of a bustling celebration, cars overflowing, music, the distant murmur of voices. But there was nothing. The hall stood silent, its windows dark and reflecting the empty sky like vacant eyes. A chill, colder than the morning air, snaked its way through her. She approached the double doors, pushing one open just enough to peer inside. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light, illuminating rows of empty chairs stacked neatly against the walls, tables draped in forgotten plastic covers. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of disuse and disappointment. Her name, Eleanor Brooks, had been listed on the original invitation, meticulously printed, alongside all the others. She had RSVP'd promptly, even offered to bring her famous lemon drizzle cake, a recipe passed down from her grandmother, a quiet offering of peace. Now, standing in the echoing void of an abandoned hall, the truth settled over her with the weight of a stone. This wasn't just a simple mistake, a mix-up in communication. This was deliberate. This was exclusion, stark and unapologetic, a direct message that she was not wanted, that she was not considered part of their family. Her jaw tightened, a muscle clenching rhythmically. Her eyes, usually warm pools of hazel, narrowed, hardening with a resolve born of a lifetime of being underestimated. The sting was sharp but familiar. It was the same sting she'd felt when her Aunt Beatrice had commented on her plain dress at a cousin's wedding, or when Uncle Thomas had loudly dismissed her early business ventures as fanciful notions for a girl. They had always seen her as the quiet, slightly awkward niece, the one who didn't quite fit into their world of inherited wealth and social climbing. They never saw the steel beneath her gentle demeanor, the relentless determination that had transformed her into a formidable force in the financial markets. A woman capable of navigating the most complex deals with a quiet grace that belied her power. Her family, blinded by their own self-importance and superficial judgments, had remained oblivious to the woman she had become. They were still living in the past, a past where Eleanor was simply poor Sarah's child, a distant relation to be tolerated, not celebrated. The lemon drizzle cake, still in its pristine box on her passenger seat, felt like a cruel joke. It symbolized her sincere desire for connection, a desire they had carelessly trampled. A slow, simmering anger began to replace the initial hurt, not a wild, uncontrollable rage, but a cold, precise fury that sharpened her mind and focused her intent. She reached into her handbag, her fingers finding the cool metal of her phone. She did not call Aunt Beatrice, nor Cousin Mark, nor Uncle Thomas to inquire about the reunion's whereabouts. There was no desperate plea for information, no tearful accusation. That was not Eleanor's way. Her response was always measured, always strategic, and always delivered with impact. She understood the power of silence, the weight of an unsaid truth. Instead, her thumbs moved with a decisive swiftness across the screen. Her gaze, however, remained fixed on the dusty, empty hall, a symbol of their casual cruelty. Her eyes, however, weren't clouded by tears, but by a vision forming, clear and sharp, of a different kind of reunion, one where the balance of power would shift irrevocably. Eleanor walked back to her car, the sun now higher, beating down on the empty lot. She didn't slam the door, she closed it with a soft click that resonated with quiet finality. Her phone was already open, her fingers scrolling through her contacts, not for family numbers, but for a different kind of connection. Her first call was to her assistant, Liam, a young man whose efficiency was matched only by his discretion. Liam. Her voice was calm, almost devoid of emotion. I need you to confirm something for me. The Blue Waters Resort in Camps Bay. Is it currently listed for sale? There was a brief pause on the other end, the whir of keys as Liam typed. Just a moment, Miss Brooks. Ah, yes, it is. Quietly on the market for the last 6 months, actually. Family owned, apparently, looking to offload it quickly for personal reasons. Price is significant. Eleanor hummed, a low, thoughtful sound. Significant but not insurmountable, I imagine. Liam's voice held a note of professional curiosity. Not for you, Miss Brooks, may I ask? Not yet, Liam. Just gather all available information on the sale. Financials, operational costs, the works. I need it by noon, sharp. Consider it done. The call ended. Her next call was to her senior legal counsel, Mr. Davies, a man known for his meticulous attention to detail and his ability to navigate complex acquisitions with surgical precision. Davies, she began, her tone unwavering. I have a new project for you. I want to acquire the Blue Waters Resort, discreetly and quickly. Mr. Davies, a seasoned veteran of countless corporate takeovers, allowed himself a slight pause. The Blue Waters? A charming establishment, though perhaps a little dated. Are we thinking long-term investment, Miss Brooks? Redevelopment? We're thinking immediate acquisition, Davies. All cash. I want to close by the end of the business day, if humanly possible. No public announcements. Absolute confidentiality. Mr. Davies' voice sharpened, betraying a flicker of surprise. That's aggressive, Miss Brooks. Such a turnaround would be unprecedented, even for you. There will be considerable premiums involved for speed, not to mention the legal complexities of rushing due diligence. I understand the implications, Davies. Consider the premiums accounted for. As for due diligence, Liam is compiling the preliminary information as we speak. I trust your judgment on the remaining legalities. Just make it happen. Very well, Miss Brooks. It will require a team working through the night, but consider it a challenge accepted. Eleanor ended the call, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Her mind, a finely tuned machine, was already calculating the logistics, the swift transfer of funds, the legal maneuvers that would bypass typical bureaucratic delays. This wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was about reclaiming her narrative, about demonstrating, in the most irrefutable way, that she was not the person they imagined her to be. It was about respect, about value, about standing tall when others tried to diminish you. While Eleanor was making her calls, preparing to shift an entire resort into her ownership, her family was indeed living it up at the Blue Waters. The resort, with its sprawling lawns and stunning ocean views, was a world away from the dusty community hall. Aunt Beatrice, resplendent in a floral silk dress, flitted between tables, dispensing air kisses and sharp, cutting remarks disguised as endearments. "Isn't this just divine, Mark?" she cooed to her son, Cousin Mark, as he sipped an expensive cocktail. "So much more suitable than that dreadful old hall. Honestly, I don't know what some people were thinking. We simply had to move it. Much more befitting our standing." Mark, a man whose inheritance had dulled his ambition, merely grunted in agreement, his eyes scanning the crowd for opportunities to network or flirt. Uncle Thomas, a jovial but easily swayed man, laughed a little too loudly at Aunt Beatrice's pronouncements, oblivious to the deeper implications of their decision. "Yes, yes, Beatrice is always right," he boomed, raising his glass. "Exclusivity, that's what we need. Keep it in the family, eh?" The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Eleanor, the quiet, hard-working architect of her own success, was the one truly keeping it in the family, though not in the way they intended. The family, particularly Aunt Beatrice, had orchestrated Eleanor's exclusion with a casual cruelty that spoke volumes about their character. Honestly, Aunt Beatrice had confided to a distant cousin earlier that week. "Eleanor just doesn't quite fit in. She's always so quiet, so intense. And her little investment ventures, while I'm sure they're perfectly charming, don't quite align with our social circles. Better to have a more intimate gathering, don't you think?" The distant cousin, eager to stay in Beatrice's good graces, had readily agreed, nodding vigorously. And so, the text messages and emails about the change of venue had conveniently missed Eleanor. It was a calculated snub, designed to reinforce the pecking order they had established, to remind Eleanor of her perceived lower status. They believed they were protecting their carefully curated image, unaware that they were about to expose their own vulnerabilities. As Eleanor drove towards the resort, the late afternoon sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she felt a profound sense of calm. The rush of the past few hours, the phone calls, the swift movements of her team, had been a whirlwind of professional expertise. The deal was done. The resort, the very place where her family reveled in their exclusivity, was now hers. She parked her sedan, once again choosing a spot that wouldn't draw attention, a familiar habit born of years spent observing rather than participating in social theatrics. From the moment she stepped out of her car, the warm sea air carrying the faint scent of salt and expensive perfume, she noticed the stark contrast between her quiet presence and the loud celebration unfolding before her. The Blue Waters Resort shimmered under the dying light, its pristine white walls and manicured gardens a testament to opulence. The sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and a smooth jazz band drifted from the grand patio where her family had gathered. Eleanor took a deep breath, the subtle tension in her shoulders easing as she took in the scene. She noticed the small details, the way the waiters moved with effortless grace, the exquisite floral arrangements, the gleam of crystal glasses. Her eyes scanned the familiar faces, now illuminated by the soft glow of fairy lights strung across the patio. There was Aunt Beatrice, holding court near the fountain, her laughter shrill and unmistakable. Cousin Mark, always glued to his phone, occasionally glanced up to offer a half-smile to a passing relative. Uncle Thomas was regaling a small group with an exaggerated anecdote, his arm around his wife, who looked thoroughly bored. It was a tableau of their perceived success, their tightly knit circle of privilege. Eleanor, dressed in a simple, elegant navy dress, walked with quiet purpose towards the main entrance. She didn't seek attention, she merely moved with the assurance of someone who belonged, even if her family believed otherwise. A few guests, not family, glanced her way, perhaps noting her composed demeanor, but quickly looked away, drawn back into the festive atmosphere. She approached the reception desk. A young, impeccably dressed woman looked up, her smile practiced and polite. "Good evening, madam. How may I assist you? Eleanor offered a small, knowing smile. Good evening. I believe I have an appointment with Mr. Dubois, your general manager. My name is Eleanor Brooks. The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Dubois was a very busy man, rarely available without prior, extensive notice. One moment, please, Miss Brooks. I'll just confirm. The receptionist made a quick call, her voice hushed. A few moments later, Mr. Dubois himself emerged from his office, a man in his late 50s with a stern but professional demeanor. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, held a flicker of something new, a blend of surprise and deference. Miss Brooks, he said, extending a hand, his grip firm. A distinct pleasure. I apologize for not greeting you personally at the entrance. Your acquisition was remarkably swift. Eleanor's smile widened slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of his understanding. No apologies necessary, Mr. Dubois. I prefer to observe before I engage, and I believe my family is quite engaged out on the patio. Mr. Dubois allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. Indeed, Miss Brooks, they are. He led her through a less frequented corridor, away from the main celebrations, towards a discreet side door that opened directly onto the edge of the sprawling patio. From this vantage point, Eleanor could see her family clearly, hear their conversations, their boasts, their casual criticisms, all while remaining unseen. She observed them for a full 5 minutes, a silent witness to the very dynamics that had led to her exclusion. She saw Aunt Beatrice's dismissive wave when someone mentioned an absent family member, a gesture that almost certainly referred to her. She heard Cousin Mark loudly lamenting, those awkward family members who don't quite get it, clearly referencing Eleanor's quiet nature. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was now overlaid with a profound sense of detachment, almost like observing a play. She was no longer a participant in their drama, but the director, holding the strings they didn't even know existed. Mr. Dubois, Eleanor finally said, her voice clear and resonant, even over the faint music. I believe it's time for me to make my entrance. Mr. Dubois nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. He gestured towards the main thoroughfare of the patio, where a small, elevated bandstand stood vacant. Perhaps, he suggested, a brief announcement would be appropriate. Eleanor's eyes glinted with a quiet determination. Perfect. Eleanor walked onto the patio, not directly towards her family, but towards the small bandstand, her movements unhurried, graceful. Her presence, subtle at first, began to register. A few heads turned, then more. The jazz band, sensing the shift in atmosphere, gently faded their music to a soft background hum. Aunt Beatrice, in the midst of a particularly animated story about her recent luxury cruise, paused mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing as she spotted Eleanor. Her polished smile faltered. "Eleanor?" she exclaimed, her voice laced with surprise and an undeniable irritation. "What on earth are you doing here? Did you get the memo?" "We moved the reunion. The old hall simply wasn't suitable." Her tone was dismissive, designed to make Eleanor feel small and out of place, to highlight her perceived error. Cousin Mark, looking up from his phone, rolled his eyes. "Oh, Aunt Eleanor. Always a step behind, aren't we?" Uncle Thomas, slightly more embarrassed, offered a weak, "Hello, Eleanor. Lovely to see you." But his gaze darted nervously between Eleanor and Aunt Beatrice, clearly uncomfortable. Eleanor ignored their veiled insults, her gaze steady, unwavering. She reached the bandstand, her hand gently touching the microphone that the bandleader, prompted by a subtle nod from Mr. Bay, Dubois had just switched on for her. The soft click of the microphone echoed across the now quieter patio. A hush fell over the crowd as everyone turned to face her, sensing the unusual tension in the air. "Good evening, everyone." Eleanor's voice, though quiet, carried clearly, resonating with an unexpected authority. Or perhaps I should say, "Good evening, family." It seems there was a slight mix-up regarding the venue for our reunion. I understand the original location, the community hall, was deemed unsuitable. Her eyes flickered to Aunt Beatrice, who bristled under her direct gaze. However, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a quiet power, I confess I didn't get the memo myself. I arrived at the old hall this morning, only to find it deserted. And for a moment, I admit, I felt a familiar sting of disappointment, of exclusion. A ripple went through the crowd. Some family members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Aunt Beatrice, however, recovered her composure, a patronizing smile returning to her lips. Well, darling, we tried to reach you, but you're always so busy with your little projects. And frankly, we simply decided to upgrade the venue. This is so much more fitting for the caliber of our family, wouldn't you agree? Her words dripped with condescension, intended to put Eleanor in her place. Eleanor's smile didn't waver. Indeed, Aunt Beatrice, a significant upgrade. So significant, in fact, that I decided to make it a permanent fixture. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air, allowing the confused murmurs to spread through the family gathering. Then, her gaze swept across the bewildered faces, landing squarely on Aunt Beatrice, Cousin Mark, and Uncle Thomas. You see, she continued, her voice rising slightly, clear and resonant, when I realized the reunion had been moved, and that I, a member of this family, had not been informed, I didn't call to ask why. I didn't demand an explanation. Instead, I made a few phone calls of my own. She gestured with a graceful sweep of her hand towards Mr. Dubois, who stood just behind her, his expression now one of proud admiration. And as of precisely 3:47 p.m. this afternoon, the Blue Waters Resort, where you are currently enjoying your exclusive family reunion, became my property. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. For a moment, there was absolute, stunned silence. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint murmur of the ocean in the distance. Aunt Beatrice's face, usually so composed, contorted in disbelief. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide with shock. What? She finally managed, her voice a strangled whisper. That's impossible. You? Buy this resort? Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor. Cousin Mark sputtered. Aunt Eleanor, this isn't funny. This is a 5-star establishment. Eleanor simply looked at them, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Dubois, she said, turning slightly to the general manager. Perhaps you would be so kind as to confirm the new ownership to my family. Mr. Dubois stepped forward, his voice clear and professional, carrying the weight of indisputable fact. Indeed, as of this afternoon, the Blue Waters Resort is officially owned by Miss Eleanor Brooks. The transaction was completed with remarkable efficiency, and Miss Brooks is now, without question, the sole proprietor. The truth landed with the force of a physical blow. Aunt Beatrice staggered back a step, her hand flying to her chest. Her carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbled, revealing a raw, unadulterated humiliation. Cousin Mark's face went from disbelief to a dawning, horrified realization. Uncle Thomas, speechless, could only stare, his mouth agape. The entire patio erupted in a cacophony of murmurs, gasps, and whispers. Family members, who moments before had been so quick to dismiss Eleanor, now looked at her with a mixture of awe, confusion, and fear. The power dynamics had irrevocably shifted. The hidden gem had not merely been discovered, she had purchased the very setting of their disregard and, with quiet dignity, taken her rightful place at its head. The air crackled with the aftermath of Eleanor's announcement. The initial shock slowly gave way to a wave of whispered conversations, a mixture of disbelief, awe, and thinly veiled resentment. Aunt Beatrice, her face pale, clung to a nearby table for support, her earlier imperiousness replaced by a trembling fragility. This is insane," she muttered, not to Eleanor, but to the air around her, as if trying to conjure a different reality. Cousin Mark, typically so self-assured, looked utterly deflated, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. Uncle Thomas, usually so boisterous, was strangely quiet, his gaze fixed on Eleanor with a look of dawning comprehension, perhaps even regret. Eleanor, however, remained calm, her posture radiating an understated power. She wasn't reveling in their discomfort, but observing it, allowing the truth to settle. She stepped down from the bandstand, not towards her immediate family, but towards a group of more distant relatives who had always been kinder, less judgmental. "I understand this may come as a surprise," she said, her voice softer now, more conversational, "but my intention was never to disrupt your enjoyment. Merely to ensure that all members of this family understand the true meaning of belonging." She met Aunt Beatrice's horrified gaze. "Aunt Beatrice, you often spoke of suitability. I believe this resort, now under new management, perfectly embodies a certain kind of suitability. One that values respect, integrity, and genuine connection over superficial pretense." Aunt Beatrice found her voice, though it was now thin and reedy. "But why, Eleanor? Why go to such lengths? Is this some kind of revenge?" Eleanor shook her head slowly, her eyes clear. "No, Aunt Beatrice. Revenge is a fleeting satisfaction. This is about establishing a fundamental truth. It's about demonstrating that worth is not inherited, nor is it bestowed by social standing. It is earned, cultivated, and, ultimately, it demands to be seen. You chose to exclude me, to make me feel small. I simply chose to remind you of the vastness of what you overlooked." Her words, though calm, were sharp and precise, cutting through the self-serving narrative her family had built for years. Cousin Mark, finding a sliver of his bravado, interjected, "But what does this mean? Are you going to kick us out?" Eleanor gave him a cool, appraising look. "No, Mark. Not immediately. The party will continue, for now. But understand this, the rules of engagement have changed. Every employee in this resort, from the gardeners to the general manager, now reports to me. Their well-being, their fair treatment, will be my top priority. And that extends to how guests, even family guests, conduct themselves." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces, some defiant, some contrite, most simply bewildered. "This resort is no longer just a backdrop for your selective gatherings. It is a business, and it will be run with the utmost professionalism and respect for everyone within its walls. That includes the family of the owner." The implication was clear, their entitlement had just lost its footing. Uncle Thomas, surprising everyone, stepped forward, his shoulders slumped. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. We should have told you." Eleanor's gaze softened slightly as she looked at him. "Uncle Thomas, apologies are a start. Understanding is the real work." The evening continued, but the atmosphere was irrevocably altered. The jazz music now felt like a lament, the clinking glasses a hollow echo. The family members, once so boisterous, were subdued, constantly glancing at Eleanor, who moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, speaking to the resort staff, observing the operation with a keen eye. Her presence, once dismissed, was now undeniably central. The next morning, the Blue Waters Resort awoke to a different kind of quiet. The boisterous laughter of the night before was replaced by a subdued murmuring as families checked out, their expressions a mix of lingering shock and awkward curiosity. Eleanor had already been up for hours, meeting with Mr. Dubois and the heads of departments, discussing the resort's operations, its strengths, and its areas for improvement. She moved through the corridors, no longer just a guest, but the decisive, visionary owner. Her steps were firm, her questions incisive, betraying a deep understanding of business, far beyond what her family had ever given her credit for. Aunt Beatrice, looking considerably less polished than the night before, approached Eleanor in the lobby, her usual bravado replaced by a forced humility. "Eleanor," she began, her voice carefully modulated, "about last night. Perhaps we could talk? This has all been quite overwhelming." Eleanor looked up from a financial report, her expression unreadable. It has been, Aunt Beatrice, for all of us. What precisely would you like to discuss? Aunt Beatrice wrung her hands. Well, your, your acquisition. It's just so sudden. And about the reunion, we truly didn't mean to hurt your feelings. It was just an oversight. Eleanor closed the report, placing it precisely on the table. An oversight, Aunt Beatrice, that required a multi-million rand transaction to correct. I assure you, it was no oversight. It was a deliberate act of exclusion. And while I appreciate the sentiment, a mere apology does not erase years of feeling like an outsider, of having my achievements trivialized, my presence deemed unworthy. Her words were not angry, but factual, imbued with the weight of long-held truth. Aunt Beatrice visibly winced. But we're family. Eleanor nodded slowly. Precisely. And true family treats each other with respect, regardless of their perceived status or their chosen path in life. True family sees the individual, not just the reflection of their own expectations. Cousin Mark, standing awkwardly nearby, finally spoke up, a rare hint of genuine contrition in his voice. Aunt Eleanor, I guess I never really understood what you did. I mean, I thought you just dabbled. Eleanor looked at him, a flicker of something almost akin to pity in her eyes. Many people dabbled, Mark. I built an empire, brick by painful brick, without the benefit of inherited privilege or a family network to smooth the path. I learned the hard way that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself, and the only validation that truly matters is your own. Uncle Thomas, however, stepped forward, his expression genuinely chastened. Eleanor, I truly am sorry. We were wrong. We were arrogant. We let Beatrice influence us. You always were the smartest of us all, even if we were too blind to see it. Can we make amends? Eleanor met his gaze, and for the first time, a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. Making amends, Uncle Thomas, is a process. It requires more than words. It requires a shift in perspective, a genuine willingness to see and appreciate the worth in every person, regardless of their background or their place in the social hierarchy. It requires active effort, not passive acceptance. She paused, her eyes sweeping over her family, then out towards the sparkling ocean. This resort is not just a symbol of my financial success. It is a symbol of possibility, of transformation. I intend to make it a place where everyone, regardless of their background, feels valued and respected. And perhaps, my family, you can learn that lesson here too. Her words were a quiet challenge, a gentle invitation to introspection rather than a vengeful decree. Some, like Aunt Beatrice and Cousin Mark, still seemed trapped in their own shame and resentment, unable to fully grasp the profound lesson. But Uncle Thomas looked at Eleanor with a new admiration, a spark of understanding in his eyes. The shift had begun, not just in ownership, but in the very fabric of their family dynamics. Eleanor spent the next few weeks at the Blue Waters Resort, not as a remote owner, but as an active, hands-on leader. She walked the grounds, spoke to every staff member, from the groundskeepers to the head chef, learning their names, their stories, their concerns. Her humility, a stark contrast to the perceived arrogance of her family, quickly earned her the loyalty and respect of the resort's employees. She implemented immediate changes, better staff benefits, clearer communication channels, and a renewed focus on genuine hospitality that extended to every guest, not just the VIPs. Her presence was a calming, yet powerful force. She wasn't just a boss. She was a mentor, a listener, and a quiet advocate for fairness. Her family, meanwhile, was forced to confront the new reality. Aunt Beatrice, stripped of her social leverage, found her calls less frequently returned, her opinions less eagerly sought. The carefully constructed facade of her life was starting to crack, revealing the insecurity beneath. Cousin Mark, without his mother's enabling, was forced to consider his own lack of direction. He even, to Eleanor's quiet surprise, asked her for advice on a small investment idea, a hesitant step towards independent thought. Uncle Thomas, however, became a surprising ally. He often visited the resort, not as a demanding relative, but as a humbled observer. He would sit and watch Eleanor interact with the staff, listen to her thoughtful discussions with Mr. Dubois, and slowly, a genuine admiration grew. He started to understand the depth of her character, the relentless dedication that had built her success. One afternoon he approached her, a cup of tea in his hand. "Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I've been thinking about what you said, about respect, and about true family." He sighed, looking out at the ocean. "We were so caught up in appearances, in what we thought we were, that we failed to see what you truly are. You are the strongest among us. And the kindest, despite everything." Eleanor looked at him, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you, Uncle Thomas. It means a great deal to hear that. What you did, it wasn't just about showing us up," he continued, his gaze direct. "It was about showing us what's possible, what genuine strength looks like, and what we lost by not recognizing it sooner." He paused, then took a deep breath. "I want to help. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, to contribute to the new rules of engagement here, please tell me." It was a genuine offer of reconciliation, a sign that the transformation had begun, not just in Eleanor's status, but in the hearts of some who had dismissed her. The Blue Waters Resort thrived under Eleanor's leadership. It became a beacon of genuine hospitality and respect, a place where the staff felt valued and the guests experienced true care. The story of its acquisition became a whispered legend, a modern fable of an underdog's triumph that resonated deeply with those who had ever felt underestimated. Eleanor, the quiet investor who had once felt invisible, now stood tall, not defined by her family's dismissiveness, but by her own formidable strength and unwavering integrity. Her hidden gem had been unearthed, and its brilliance was now illuminating the path for others, proving that true worth, once seen, can reshape entire worlds. This story of Eleanor Brooks, the woman who bought a resort to teach her family a lesson in worth, is more than just a dramatic tale of defiance. It's a profound reminder that true value is not assigned by external approval or inherited status. It is cultivated within, through hard work, resilience, and an unwavering belief in one's own capabilities. Have you ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated? Did it fuel a quiet fire within you, a determination to prove your detractors wrong, not with anger, but with undeniable achievement? Eleanor's journey reminds us that sometimes the most powerful response to being unseen is to shine so brightly that you cannot be ignored. Her story is a testament to the fact that those who dismiss us often fail to see the extraordinary potential simmering beneath the surface, the hidden strengths forged in silence and perseverance. It teaches us that true power lies not in asserting dominance, but in embodying your worth with such conviction that it transforms the landscape around you. So, remember Eleanor. Remember the quiet dignity with which she navigated exclusion, and the powerful, strategic grace with which she reclaimed her narrative. Let her story be an inspiration to you, a gentle nudge to recognize the hidden gems in your own life, and perhaps to acknowledge the extraordinary potential within yourself that others may have overlooked. Don't wait for permission to be seen. Create the stage for your own spotlight. Share this story, not as a tale of revenge, but as a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever felt invisible. Comment below with your own experiences of overcoming dismissal. And remind someone today that their worth is intrinsic, immeasurable, and utterly undeniable.